Hi everyone, this is Don Giannetti, Lighting Essentials, lighting-essentials.com. I'm teaching a class over at UDEMY on using simple gear to create portraits, and it's been very successful. Got all 5-star reviews at this point, and got a lot of people, over 350 people taking the workshop. It's very inexpensive, and right now we're pushing about 7 hours. By the time December 2012 rolls around, we will have close to 8 hours of instruction there for you. So I do Photoshop, I do Lightroom, I include the Photoshop PSD files so that you can take it apart watching the Photoshop. We have all kinds of great demonstrations on lighting. But anyway, we have some photographers there who use Lightroom only, and their question to me was, can you do some of the retouching that you do in Photoshop in Lightroom? Truth be told, I can do some of the Photoshop work that I do in Lightroom, not all of it, but Lightroom has its own set of tools as well that I like very much for doing something simple. So we're going to take this image and do some work with it, shall we? First of all, when I'm working here, I like to put away this so that I have as much room as possible. So I can put away that little tray of images. If I need to get it back, of course, I can go down and click this and it's back. I can click this and it's gone. So I get as much real estate for the image as I possibly can get. The image that you see here was taken with, this is Abby. We're in Minneapolis, or near Minneapolis anyway, out in Minnesota, in the cornfields, and I love these big clouds in the sky. The sky was just amazing. So I wanted to bring that in, as well as the cornfields, and Abby's dressed in her Halloween's, I guess it's a Harry Potter type theme from a recent play or something that she had done. Anyway, I wanted to just sort of include the long flowing jacket. The wind was blowing, so we got a little help there, but the light was just a little soft on where we were. So I added a strobe, a bare strobe, up on a stand just out of right here. It's just right here, and it's up high and it's coming right down on her. Okay, I didn't you can see that there's sunlight back here. You can see a little bit of shadow coming forward from Abby's legs right here, and very little going this way. And that's because I balanced the strobe to be just a slight bit less than the sun, so that we still recorded her. She's not in the shade. Now, she would normally be in the shade on this side. She's not in the shade, but I didn't want that overly flash look. I think that can detract. So you can see little flash lighting up Abby right about in here, and the rest of this is all sunlight. It's also kind of a drab shot as it came out of the camera. Most of the time, I think stuff that comes right out of the camera is a little drab. So let's clean this up in Lightroom and do a little extra special things. First of all, when I look at an image, I look for the detail that I want to show. I love the corn. I want to bring the corn out. Obviously want Abby to stand out. I really want these clouds to be more ominous. I'd like to get a feeling of light on this part of the cornfield and shadow back on that part of the cornfield back there, maybe as if a cloud had come over. And then we've got this funky area up here that we've got a little bit of mud and some grass and stuff. We want to do something with that to make it not so much of a problem, or at least enhance it, so instead of being a problem, it looks kind of cool. All right, so let's play with this in Lightroom. These are all simple moves. I am not a Lightroom guru. There are other people who do that. I'm going to show you how I do a little bit of retouching, or actually post-processing, I like to think of it, in Lightroom. Okay, so we have our image as shot right here. This is it, and everything's lined up here. Let's take our base image and make sure we've got it where we want it. So I'm going to open up the exposure just a little bit. I'm going to open up the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to take the highlights up so we can see a little bit more. There we go, a little bit more highlights on the corn. Take the shadows up so we get a little bit more shadow on the corn. Leave the whites and blacks where they are for now. Clarity, I'm going to move the clarity up just a little bit, say 20. I don't want this clarity to be too much on the image, because I'm going to add it in selective places down the road here as we go. Let's bring it back. Vibrance, nah, you know what? I'm going to leave vibrance alone. I like to put the vibrance on kind of towards the end when I make a decision on whether it's going to be a lot of color, we're going to have a little bit of a muted tone thing going on, what have you. So let's darken our sky and darken our foreground just a little bit here, shall we? I'm going to go in here with the graduated filter, and I'm going to bring it up to the top. And when I do that, it's set to all kinds of things that I had set before. So let's clear these things off here. I don't want this to be influencing this right now. There we go. Exposure. Now I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to drag it down. And as I drag this down, you notice how it gets all cattywampus there? If you hold the shift key down, it'll come straight down. The center part shows you where the break starts to happen. I'm going to bring the break in right about there. So as I change the exposure in this area, it's going to get much darker up here, and right here it's going to feather out. Okay, so I'm going to take my exposure, and I'm going to lower the exposure just a little bit there. I'm also going to take my clarity up just a little bit. I like to add the clarity a little bit at a time, about 35. All right, right there. Now that makes a nice looking sky, I think. I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to bring this up from the bottom. I'm holding my shift key down. I'm going to bring it right up from the bottom, right to about there. And again, I'm going to lower my exposure. Let's take it down just a little bit. There we go. So now we kind of feature more of Abby in the shot. And I'm going to say done at this point. Now I can always come back by clicking this right here, the mask tool. I can always come back to either one of those masks, highlight it, and there's my settings, and I can change my settings. I might want a little more sharpness in it. What happens if I saturate that sky a little bit? Let's see what happens. Oh, get a little bit more blue going on. I kind of like that. See what I'm saying? Shadows, we can move the shadows down, get a little bit more on that sky. So we can always come back to our settings by clicking on those little buttons. The next place that we're going to look here is the brushes. These brushes are pretty fantastic what they do. They're pretty cool. They're kind of, you're going to be painting an area, and then once you've painted that area, then you can apply all of these same tools here to the area that you've painted. So it's not like layers in Photoshop. It's actually painted areas on here, and they will overlap if you want them to. So I'm going to click on my brush, and of course we get a new brush. Now you see the put it right here right here so you can see it. By clicking my bracket key, the right bracket key, I can make it bigger, and my left bracket key, I can make it smaller. I'm going to attempt to paint the foreground here, and as I paint it like this, it's really hard to keep track of what I'm doing. So I'm going to push the O. O is going to turn it into a mask. When I turn it into a mask, I can then see where I'm painting. And I can, using the bracket key, I can make it very small, go right up next to Abby's legs and shoes right there. I can paint right along in here, even smaller. It's got a soft edge to it built in. And make it a little bit larger, fill this in here. I'm painting this area so that I can go back to this area on my sliders to the left, and I can apply all of the sliders that you see just to this painted area. I'll bring it right over here, right down the front of Abby's legs right there. Because we're going to darken this area up, and I don't want to darken Abby up. Okay? I'm going to push O again, and that takes us back to seeing what we're doing. We're going to take our exposure and we're going to drop it down, and as we drop it down, you can see that foreground getting darker and darker, and you can see that Abby is not involved in that darkness. She's still standing out against the dark background, which is kind of cool. I'm going to click New again, and I'm going to come in here and lighten up that grass just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to come in here with this new brush, make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to go right in here and do the grass, just the grass a little bit. I'm going to take my exposure, and I'm going to move my exposure up just a bit. There we go. So now we've taken that kind of dull and boring area here, and we've actually moved it up and made it a little bit brighter. I'm going to add some saturation to it to see what happens with that. That's a little bit more interesting, isn't it? And a little bit of clarity to bring out the detail. Not too much, just a little bit. All right. So now Abby looks pretty good, and the foreground looks pretty good, but the corn looks pretty bad. And remember, we want to kind of darken this area back here and bring out the corn so it has a feeling of the clouds, you know, lighting up this, but as the clouds move across the landscape, they darken things. So we want a kind of a feeling of the cloud moving over and darkening it in the back and bringing out the corn here. So the first thing we're going to do is click on New, get a new brush. And another way of seeing what you're painting is to just lower the exposure way down so that you can see it when you paint it. I'm just going to come right along the top here and right along the top there. Very, very important that you, when you're doing this, you get very quiet with your voice, because that's part of the mystique of being a whatever it is that we are. Anyway, you got that a little bit darker there, so I'm going to darken it up just a little bit more. I'm going to add a little saturation to it just to bring it out and some clarity. There we go. Now that looks a little bit dark back there. That's great, but this corn still looks kind of boring. I'm going to click on New again, and this time we're going to move our exposure up big so we can see what we're doing. And that's okay, because remember, we can always change it later, right? We can always change it later. So we're going to come in here and paint this corn right like this. Here we go, right through here. Now, that corn, we can warm it up by the temperature. We can say, let's warm that corn up by sliding this to the right. If we take it all the way over, it's quite orange, and we don't want that. So let's bring it back just a little bit here, just to give it a nice warm feeling, right about there. Okay, now when we do that, that looks too dark to me back there now. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just too dark. So I'm going to click on that one. That's my mask. And now I'm going to open that exposure up. Remember, we can always go back to work on those things. That looks much better and more realistic. One thing I would like to see is I'd like to see this line of trees and green there. I'd really like to bring those out a little more. So I'm going to click on New again. Move my exposure up. Now we really want to bring some clarity into this, so I'm going to move the clarity all the way up to 50 or 60. That's really what we want. I'm going to open up the shadows a little bit, get some more highlights, just a little bit of contrast, and making my brush a little bit smaller here. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open up those trees. So you feel like there's something going on back there. They just aren't dying off into the... Oops. Went a little too high there. I think I'll just start over. There we go. There we go. All right. The one last thing I would like to do is the bottoms of these clouds right here. They're dark gray right now. I'd really like to see them be deeper, more ominous, more of a sense of foreboding here. So I'm going to click on New and lower my exposure down. Leave my contrast where it is. Move my clarity up quite a bit. Saturation's good. Everything else is good. Make my brush a little bit bigger here. And then I'm just going to come right across the bottom of those clouds, right in there. Let's get right over in here. These clouds, let's bring out that. There we go. There we go. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to say done. So we've created a shot here. It looks pretty good, but I'd like to get a little more highlights on the corn if I can. So I'm going to go back right here to Adjustment Brush, New, and I'm going to come out here, my exposure very high. Clarity is good with exposure very high, and I'm just going to brush in some highlights right along in here, right along that edge, upper edge of this corn. I want it to feel like that corn is backlit from the sun, because, well, it kind of was at the time. Right along in here, and then just tap it in just a little bit, just like the sun would be grabbing this and that and something else, and right along in here. That looks pretty good. Way too bright, and we just simply come in here with our exposure and move it down till we get a feeling of the sunlight dappling across the corn, kind of like that. All right, well, that's pretty much what I can do here in Lightroom with a real simple image and just a light retouching. You can spend a lot more time and do a lot of other things if you want, but this is kind of what I like to do in Lightroom, is to take a photograph and to take it just a little bit farther than it came out of the camera. I still use Photoshop extensively, especially with other types of shots, with skin retouching, and if I really need to get in and do some very, very tight work, I can. But this image will print beautifully, and it'll show beautifully in Abby's portfolio, so we're pretty good. One other thing, I'm sorry, before I finish though, I see that I'd like to go back in here with this, lower my exposure down, and bring out that, there we go. We had a little walkway that went back into the corn. We have two of them here. I'm going to put a little shadow on both sides of them. There we go. Now we're done. And as we're done, we right click and we export. And we export right to JPEG. The export dialog box has a lot of stuff in it. You can go through it as you do it, but any way you really want to do it, you certainly can. Or you can simply take it out into Photoshop if you wish and continue to work on it. So that's what I do on in Lightroom, and I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for coming along.